In the summer of 2013, Chilgok County in South Korea stood as one of those unassuming towns where life unfolded at a quiet pace. Nestled in North Gyeongsang Province, the days here were slow, the neighbors familiar, and the troubles, when they came, rarely loud. From the outside, the two-story home near the town's edge blended in like any other. No one paid particular attention to the family that lived there. A man in his 40s, his new wife, and two girls from his previous marriage. To most, they seemed like any ordinary step-family trying to settle into a new rhythm. But behind closed doors, things felt off. The woman, then in her late 30s, had met the father not long after his divorce. Their relationship developed quickly, too quickly for some. She was reserved, often avoided neighbors, and carried herself with a kind of restrained tension. She rarely smiled in public. Some found her voice too sharp, her posture too stiff. Others simply thought she was private, perhaps guarded by nature. No formal criminal record existed, but those who knew her said she had always struggled to manage frustration. She wanted order, predictability, and couldn't bear disobedience. The man she married was gentler, quieter. He kept to himself and rarely challenged authority. He had two daughters from his previous marriage, aged 12 and 8. After the divorce, he was granted custody, and his new wife assumed the role of stepmother. From the outside, it looked like a woman stepping up to help raise children that weren't biologically hers. But the reality was more complicated. The new stepmother wasn't affectionate. She was strict, especially with the younger child. She believed in structure, in strict routines, in punishment over persuasion. Within the first few months of the marriage, the family dynamic began to shift. The girls, once chatty at school, grew quieter. There was no shouting in the house, no police calls, just an uneasy stillness. The stepmother rarely let the children out of her sight. The father was not violent, but he wasn't protective either. Friends from his past said he had always been passive, uncomfortable with confrontation, someone who would rather disappear into his work than face conflict at home. He loved his daughters, but didn't always know how to show it. When the stepmother criticized the girls' behavior or scolded them at family gatherings, he'd stay silent, eyes downcast, lips tight. Whether out of fear or resignation, he let her take control. The home was becoming increasingly isolated. No friends visited. No one dropped by. Curtains were always drawn. The girls were kept indoors, sometimes for days. It's often said that before a storm, the world goes silent. In that Chilgok home, the silence had become a way of life. Tension sat in the walls like humidity. The air was thick with rules, with obedience, with fear. But from the outside, everything looked normal. A father, a mother, two daughters. A family with no police record, no screaming in the night. Just an ordinary home in an ordinary neighborhood. No one could have known what was coming next. By August 14, 2013, the fragile rhythms of the Chilgok household began to fracture completely. That morning, the 8-year-old stepdaughter went off to school already in pain. Though no one noticed at the time, she had suffered internal injuries earlier that day. Injuries inflicted by her stepmother before the school bell even rang. By the afternoon, when she returned home, the pain had worsened. She complained of stomach aches, her voice quiet but persistent. What followed was not discipline, but sustained physical coercion. The woman, frustrated by the girl's complaints, struck her again, delivering forceful blows to her back, legs, and torso. Medical reports later confirmed those blows caused rib fractures and internal tearing, leading to a catastrophic rupture of the mesentery, tissue that holds the intestines in place. The resulting peritonitis, left untreated, was fatal. She died later that day from untreated internal bleeding. The cause? Prolonged blunt force trauma consistent with escalating abuse, not accident. As the youngest lay dying, her 12-year-old sister, the elder child, became ensnared in a pattern of emotional and physical torment. She was forced to falsely confess to having caused her younger sister's death, coerced under duress and fear. Investigators discovered she had been locked inside a washing machine as punishment. She endured water immersion torture in a bathtub. There were signs of humiliation, violent confinement, and she had also been a victim of sexual misconduct at the hands of the stepmother. Bruises and old fractures on her arms and ribs revealed a history of repeated physical trauma over time. Examining the elder sister, medical professionals found multiple injuries across different healing stages: healed rib fractures, long-standing bruises, and scars. These indicated chronic abuse, not isolated incidents. The investigative team viewed her as a secondary victim, psychologically manipulated, physically harmed, and forced into silence. Police arrived within 24 hours and began detailed forensic mapping. The victim's injuries were charted by age and impact pattern. The autopsy confirmed the cause of death: internal trauma leading to peritonitis. Bruise patterns on both daughters formed a timeline: older injuries matching earlier punishments, fresh bruises consistent with the fatal session. Authorities cataloged evidence of confinement, psychological coercion, and physical beatings delivered in a systematic way. During interrogations, the elder sister described a household governed by terror. She said she was punished severely if she didn't obey, sometimes locked in a small space, or forced to endure being soaked in cold water while remaining motionless. Family members who later testified corroborated her fear. She was told to say things she didn't to believe. She trembled when asked to repeat false confessions. This emotional manipulation was integral to the abuse dynamic. The father, meanwhile, admitted that he witnessed some bruises in the weeks preceding the incident, but claimed he did not realize the severity or intervene. Investigators interpreted this as either paralysis of fear or tacit acceptance. He faced charges for neglect and failure to protect both girls. By late September 2013, both the woman and the biological father were formally arrested and indicted. The charges: injury causing death in the younger girl's case, and abuse and coercion against the elder sister. The stepmother faced multiple counts of abuse against both children. The father faced charges for allowing the abuse to continue. When the case reached Daegu District Court in April 2014, public shock was widespread. Experts described the trauma suffered by the younger child as fatal structural damage due to repeated impact. The elder child, though surviving, was diagnosed with severe psychological trauma, PTSD, anxiety, depressive symptoms, and deep emotional distrust. She testified that she had experienced prolonged fear, memory suppression, nightmares, and an inability to speak out even after her sister's death. Prosecutors portrayed a case not of accidental harm, but of calculated coercion and emotional degradation. The trauma included repeated physical assault over weeks and months, rib fractures, new and older ones, scars, internal bleeding, forced false confession under duress, confinement in dangerous spaces, washing machine, bathtub, water-based torture, sexual misconduct, emotional threats, silence reinforcement, observable signs of psychological breakdown, nightmares, withdrawal, fear of authority figures, and silence under questioning. The forensic and psychological assessments documented these traumas, including timelines mapping healing stages across both girls, bodies, and behaviors. As hearings went on, it became clear that both girls had suffered polytrauma: physical, emotional, and psychological in combination. The younger child's suffering culminated in death. The elder's trauma endured, seen in her brittle recollections and physical scars. These cases became part of Korea's broader reckoning with child protection, showing how multiple layers of harm can accumulate until tragedy unfolds. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the legal system moved slowly but decisively. On April 9, 2014, the Daegu District Court delivered its first instance ruling. The stepmother was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and the biological father received 3 years for negligence and failing to protect his daughters. Prosecutors had demanded 20 years, but the court classified the crime as injury resulting in death rather than murder, citing insufficient evidence of premeditated intent. The decision sparked immediate public backlash. Media outlets, legal commentators, and children's rights organizations condemned the sentence as shockingly lenient, especially given the pattern of long-term abuse and the deliberate manipulation of the surviving sister. The case was appealed. On May 21, 2015, the Daegu High Court re-evaluated the matter. After reviewing medical evidence, forensic records, and psychological reports, the court found the stepmother's conduct to be severe, repetitive, and intentional in its physical brutality, though still not meeting the legal threshold for murder. Her sentence was increased to 15 years, and the father's to 4 years. The court noted that while the stepmother had not set out to kill the girl, the level of violence and failure to seek help made her fully responsible for the child's death. Her behavior showed conscious disregard for life, which under Korean law met the bar for injury resulting in death, not intentional homicide. On December 11, 2015, the Supreme Court of South Korea confirmed the High Court's ruling. The final sentences were 15 years for the stepmother, for injury resulting in death, aggravated child abuse, and coercion. 4 years for the father, for neglect and failure to act, despite witnessing signs of sustained harm. The Supreme Court explicitly rejected the prosecutor's appeal seeking a 35-year sentence for the stepmother, concluding that intent to kill had not been proven beyond doubt. Throughout the appeals process, forensic psychologists assessed both perpetrators, focusing especially on the stepmother's mental state. She was described as exhibiting pathological control behaviors, enforcing rigid hierarchies within the household, emotional dysregulation, prone to outbursts of rage when her authority was challenged, displaced aggression, redirecting her frustrations and sense of personal failure onto the most vulnerable child, blunted empathy, showing little emotional response to the suffering she inflicted. Clinicians suggested signs of unresolved trauma and abandonment in her early life, which may have contributed to her compulsive need for dominance and strict control. The children, particularly the younger girl, appeared to serve as emotional targets rather than individuals to nurture. Despite extensive evidence and testimony, the stepmother showed no meaningful remorse. The court found she had not only inflicted physical harm, but also psychologically terrorized the children, coercing the elder daughter into falsely blaming herself for her sister's fatal injuries. The father, on the other hand, was not described as malicious, but rather emotionally passive, a man suffering from learned helplessness. He had noticed bruises, seen changes in the children's behavior, and yet remained inert. Experts said he was possibly overwhelmed by the dynamic, but his failure to act contributed directly to the abuse continuing. The court did not excuse his silence. The judges concluded that inaction in the face of abuse is complicity. The Chilgok case became a national symbol of systemic failure, where teachers had noticed bruises, neighbors had heard cries, but no one acted quickly enough. It led to urgent policy reviews and the 2014 passage of stricter child welfare laws, including the Child Abuse Punishment Act, allowing for heavier penalties and reclassification of abuse cases, mandatory reporting responsibilities for educators and healthcare workers, new protections for siblings of abuse victims, ensuring psychological follow-up and government monitoring. The elder daughter survived, but with deep scars. In later reports, she described fear, guilt, and a longing for safety that never came. Justice in this case came late, and for many it came only partially. But it did come.